GameDevs. In this video, we're going to talk about audio, mostly from a theoretical standpoint. There's very little to do in Unity that's not very straightforward in terms of adding an audio to a scene. So I'll leave that. But I wanted to talk about how to think about audio in a game design perspective. There's a couple different aspects of audio that are really challenging or just not something you might have thought of, and it can really improve or be a detriment to your game if you have good and or bad audio. So I have my account here, freesound.org, and we'll be using this a little bit. There's a couple things to know in game design and development about audio. One is you want to be using .wav files, not .mp3 or anything like that. So most of the files up on Freesound are .wav. See share.wav here. You need it to be in WAV. There are different kinds of file formats. WAV is not something that has compression on it, and compression, which is what MP3 has, that will create differentiations in the sound when it's played, when it's loaded. Also, MP3 is copywritten, and you actually need to purchase permission to use that in your systems. It's something that they spend a lot of money on figuring out how to get file sizes down. WAV files are way bigger. And there's also a .ogg, OGG. It's also known as a Vorbis. It's called an ogg Vorbis file, so you might hear it referenced as both. That file is also okay. There's some specialness about that file system, so we're going to avoid it, but if you came across one, you could use those as well in game development, and you can open them up and edit them up. The other thing I'm going to be using is Audacity. I love Audacity. Even though it is a free tool, it is a professional tool. It's something I use professionally. It won't help you do music as much as it will help you do sound effects. So this is my sound effects things. There are also other tools out there like Reaper as well that will help you do sound effect editing. There's Adobe, I think it's Audition. So there are other things out there. I just really prefer Audacity. It's lightweight. It installs everywhere. You can even, I've even had times where I haven't been able to install anything on a computer, but Audacity will run off of a thumb drive if you just open it up. So, some really good opportunities to use this tool. I use this throughout my professional career. So other than files type, the other things we want to think about is what's the quality of the sound, okay? So there are, the human ear can hear ranges from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. So let's just find a tone generator. So if we go down to 20 hertz, the lowest we can hear. And actually, I might not be able to hear that. At least I can't, maybe. But so here's 110. 466. And I'm going to go, way up high to 10,000. It also might be my speaker. Your speakers might vary. Ooh, that was really loud. High pitched anyway. So, so our ability to hear is the lowest range, 20 hertz, to the highest range, 20,000 hertz. In Freesound, audio is actually represented in scale via color. So the brighter it is, this yellow is going up into the higher range. You can kind of tell this is blue, and it says ambient wave. You can kind of tell. So if we press play here, and then we'll click into the blue area. Yeah, you can kind of hear that like low hum. So that color is representative of what range of audio it is. So it's a really quick way. So if you're thinking like, oh, I need to find something deep and bassy or loud and whatever, this is a good thing to be able to identify. The other thing we can identify is the loudness. So we're going to go to Audacity for this. We're going to hit record for a second, and we're going to record my voice over itself. And, I'm sure that won't be weird at all later when I press play. So this is a standard recording with whatever microphone, probably my laptop microphone. And you can tell that it's kind of not so loud. And you can tell that because the waves don't go to -1 and 1. So 1 and -1, these are the maximum loudnesses. And, it's a wave, so it goes up and down. That's why we have a top and bottom. This is the left channel. This is the right channel. So if you have stereo, you'll be able to do that. But this is the loudness of the file. And there's really nothing I can do about that once I have it there. If I want to increase the sound, the loudness of this, I have to turn up my speakers. And you know how when you're listening to something, there's always that hum in the room, right? So audio recorders do Foley artists, audio professionals, they work really hard to eliminate all of the humming and hissing that happens day to day. You'd be really surprised, if you look at a map of the airline travel across the world, there are very few places that you could stand for 10 minutes and use a microphone that doesn't have car or air traffic going over it, even in the deep wilderness. So the quality of the original recording is very important. Usually when you see stuff that's small like this, that means that the microphone wasn't very close. So you can kind of see that maybe this dry ice bubbling in water, this probably wasn't the best recording. I haven't played it much, and I'm making some quick judgments here. But we can also see that there's these other files that are loud. And so this is auto-generated, which is why it's so loud. There's also, look at this, a thunder crack, right? So thunder crack is actually explosions and that kind of stuff. It's extremely hard to record that because the microphone has to be able to take the abuse of the really loud thing and then still record the really quiet thing. So these kind of recordings can be kind of hard to come by, but you can see that it's very loud and then very quiet. So you can kind of figure out what's going on. So when we're looking for audio, we want to find audio that is big. So one of the things we want to make sure also is that the sound isn't too loud. So we can see this with explosions, so just like I was saying, it's very hard to deal with. So this is peaked audio. This means that the audio is too loud. Now, if I was recording in Audacity, I also want to make sure that I don't overblow the microphone or the ability for it to record. More sensitive and expensive microphones record better, but also mean that it's even easier to do something like this to it. So explosions can be really difficult. It's often why we have to create our own set of explosions that don't actually sound like real explosions. You've probably experienced this anytime you've recorded in high wind. When the wind is blowing against the microphone, basically it's peaking out the microphone, and it leads to some really bad artifacting. It makes it sound awful. So we really want to avoid this stuff as much as possible. This one looks, the fireworks close. This one also looks like it's pretty miserable. I'm not going to play it just because it will be really loud and crackly. But we want to stay away from too loud, and we want to stay away from too soft. That fills the space. We want it to be of the color or style and or sound that we want. And then one of the things you'll notice, horse trotting left to right. So let's take a listen to this. So that is, what we might call a Doppler effect. So let's download this. And a Doppler effect is something that happens when things go by, when the audio is stretched. Uh, so let's download this. And what we have here is a file that plays with the stereo. And you can kind of see that it's louder on the left and then it gets louder on the right hand side at the end. So this is something that's really interesting and it sounds cool, but it's actually not very useful from a game development perspective unless we're doing a cutscene or something. And the reason why is because we can control the player position and we can control where the sound is being played. So we can do this stuff automatically. So when we want to find a horse trot, we want to hear a clean clop, and we don't want it to go by. We just want it to kind of clop, and then we want it to be loopable, so it should be the same volume. And it looks like this one is a nice short one as well. So someone made a galloping one. So, these are coconut shells. So this horse gallop, very short, which is another quality we really want to have. Most of the time, games, these files are very big. Music takes up minutes and minutes, which can be 100 megabytes. That can be a huge amount. So most of the time, sound effects are as short as possible. This 29-second one, that would never happen, especially for like footsteps, which play a lot. The other thing is, like, for footsteps specifically, we might actually go down and edit the clop individually and then like add it to the hoofs so that when it lands, it does it. There's a lot of ways we could really customize it, but generally we only need one clop or one noise, and then we can play it over and over again. Another advantage of that, and that's some of the things that I did, in a lot of my work. I would go in and find loops that or I would make loops out of, or pull one sound effect from a loop, and then set up, a pool of sound effects that would randomly pick, so it would sound different each time. So yeah, we want it short. We want it to not have any weird audio effects. We want it to be loud as possible. And let's go, let's make a looping sound effect. Okay, maybe we can do that as practice. So let's see, bubbling brook. So there's two kinds of sound effects. There is a one shot. That's going to be something that plays a sound effect like an explosion, something that happens once. Then there's also ambient sound, right? Ambient sound is something that's going to loop over and over again, but you can't put a 2-minute track in order to make, you can't put a 2-minute track of looping water. It would just be way too much money, way too much storage space. So let's see, we're gonna find ourselves a bubbling brook. This is a 2-minute recording. Yeah, this sounds good. I like this. I'm listening to it and I can see that it's loud, it's clear. When I'm listening it with my ear, I can hear a lot of the value of the bubbles. You can hear also that the sound effect, it has loud, high-pitched stuff, but then there's also this gurgling. So that's a really good one. This one that I clicked down here before, this flowing river, that's okay, but that's like a raging river, not exactly what I wanted. And it's a little bit fuzzy, sounds staticky, and less attractive. So I'm just gonna select this bubbling brook. I'm gonna double check the Creative Commons. This work is attributions license. Hopefully this is enough for the attribution here. It's your account. But there's a couple other things. There's the wave file size, and you can see 25 megabytes for 2 minutes, right? Sample rate. So sample rate is how much data is in each file. if you talk on a landline, and this is something that like for the GBA, like you know how old sound effects always sound kind of tinny or like kind of like it's talking over a phone. Well, the reason why, or like a landline, the reason is because landlines are, at least the old ones, you probably at like probably they're better now, but they used to sample at 8,000 hertz. So that is approximate, you know, that's like way less data. Um, it's like a fifth less data, or it's like one fifth the data of 44,000 hertz. So 44,000, you don't need anything bigger than more than this. The human ear, you can kind of think of this like frame rate, but it's just the amount of data within each recording. You know, there's fewer frames to listen to. The sample rate, it doesn't need to go over 44,000 because we can't identify things deeper in that. Maybe some people claim they can, and maybe that is true, but in my experience, it's also like you double the file size, which is why we would downsample it. So if you also, this is also a way for if you wanted to make something sound like it's over an AM, FM, or an AM or a phone, you could use the sample rate. You could do that yourself. Bit depth 16 or 32 is fine. Channels stereo. We're going to download this and we're going to save it. So, you know, most of the time sound effects that you have, you're going to be able to download and put them in one at a time. One of the things that I recommend you do is that you make sure that you keep track of what it is that you're what files you're doing. So when you're downloading files, Freesound will keep track of this for you as well, but I think it's a really good idea to keep track of this on your own. You want to say like, okay, you want to identify when you're doing your level design, I need a looping, you know, I need a babbling brook and looping name. Oh, let me increase the size of this so that you can like see anything at all. So you want to have a name of the sound effect. You want it looping. Yes, in this case. And then file link or artist link. So this is if you're going to be downloading stuff, it's important to use, if it's work under attribution license, it means that you have to put these people in the credits, and we do this because I have to keep track of this. So this Freesound is also really fantastic because it has a lot of the data in it. So this is the link. If you copy the link location from the download and you put it right here, this is the link, and this is a really I really like this in terms of how Freesound does their filing. People, Nature Nut is the guy's name or person's name, and sounds, and this is the file extension, which also has all that information, what the file's name is, what their username is, and their user ID. So I usually just stick everything in there, and then at the end I might put in their names here, so it's very quick. But you know, link 1, link 2. But when you're doing sound effect work, sometimes you're creating monsters. If you take a look at the interviews with the sound designers from Jurassic Park actually used, you know, the dinosaurs didn't exist. So how do you make them make the noises that they make? Well, you use other animal noises, you combine them together. So oftentimes I would have 4 or 5 sound effects. Some of them would be the same sound effects that other sounds would use, but I would keep track of everything I did in a list. It's really important. You don't want to fall afoul of You don't want to fall afoul of copyright law. If you have access to a sound effect bank, use that too. As I mentioned before, though, the sound effects, don't go to YouTube and just find, oh, free YouTube sound effect, blah, blah, blah. Unless it's from a reputable company, I wouldn't believe them. A lot of people don't understand what ownership of sound is, and they especially for sound effects and things, and there's remixing and other laws that are applicable. So so I would just do that. So okay, we've so keep track of everything. We've got our file now downloaded. And here we go. So this is far too much. I'm going to delete my old sound recording here. So this is my sound. It's very long. So what I want to do is I want to select a section that doesn't sound like it has a lot of pops or whatever. So I'm going to just select this by left clicking. And then if I hit shift, it'll put the loop on. And this is actually 15 seconds. I actually only want maybe 5. I'm going to hit. So if you hear it, it's right here. Oh no, it's right here. Something is happening there. So I actually don't really like that because it has something noticeable. Whoops. And this is actually even a little too much. It goes up and then it goes down. It's kind of sing-songy. So you got to really kind of identify an area that is going to work for you and is going to feel like it loops. There you go. This one sounds a little bit better. So I might just cut that out and paste it down here. And I can mute that, and then I can just hear this automatically. So this sound effect actually came out really well. It looks like I could probably loop this without any issue. And that's really great. That actually doesn't happen all the time. So I can just grab a smaller piece out of here. Sometimes, and I'm just going to apply this process, even though this is a perfect loop right now. Sometimes when you are editing sound and there's a pop, and it usually happens right around the jump point from the beginning to end, and it may be noticeable. It doesn't seem like I got it to do it this time, but if you hear the pop, it's really noticeable, and it then becomes really rhythmic because it's always right at the same time. It can get really annoying, and how do you get rid of that? The reason why it happens is because if we zoom way down in here, see how this ends at 0? This is 0 volume. And I think what happened is I got kind of lucky when I selected what I did. So when things are at 0, we want the looping point here to kind of be at 0 volume. And then if the beginning of the sound isn't also at 0 volume, that can make that effect really gross, and it can make this popping noise, which is really undesirable. So we're going to just adjust this. Like I said, this technique is only for when you need to remove the pop, but it's not super necessary right now. So we're going to use this technique. There's no pop right now, but I'm still going to perform the technique. It's something that'll jump up. It'll something that'll get you. So what we're going to do is we know that the sound in the middle here is perfect. We know that they meet together. So I'm going to rename this first. Name track 1. So this is a 4-second clip. I'm going to, I know that right at the middle, the audio is flowing seamlessly into each other. The reason why is because it was recorded the same. This and this might not have the same recording. So I'm going to select about half of it. I'm going to cut it. I'm going to paste it. And then I've got track 2. And so if I use this mover tool here, this is where it was. So now the middle part is at the beginning. And I'm going to take this top part here and I'm going to move it so that just a little bit overlaps, but that this is at the end, so that when this sound loops, it goes from this side all the way to this side. Now, to adjust for any popping that I might hear, I think you'll probably hear it more in like car engines and stuff. So to adjust for that, I'm gonna go in here. I'm gonna have this overlap a little bit, and depending on what it sounds like, you might need more or less overlap. And I'm just gonna select this effect, fade in, and that makes this 0 and this the normal volume. And then I'm gonna select this. Oops. I want to make sure I select it right at the edge. And I'm going to select fade out. So once we do this, we can also have it seamlessly go across, and then we can export this 4-second file instead of like a really big, 20 or 2-minute file. That's just way too much for sound effects. Also, if you load that, you're sacrificing other stuff in the scene. That's a big chunk of something to load. So that's how you do a looping sound effect. If you wanted to create your own, you can. So, if you're making sound effects, cha. So if you're making sound effects, maybe you want to do some grunts or something, taking hits. You can do that. The way I recommend you do it, if you're ever like trying to do emotions or something, think about A-E-I-O-U and then apply whatever technique you're doing it. So like zombies, right? A-E-I-O-U. Sometimes Y. So we have ourselves here recording. I'll just cut that bit off at the end. So we have ourselves a recording. If we press play, it'll come in. So this is a little dry and also not loud, right? So one of the things you want to do is you want to make sure that you get the loudest thing that you can. So get a good recording. This isn't great. There is a way to adjust for it. So, first maybe we have this, and maybe we want to make this bassier. So we could add an effect, bass and treble, because we want it to be like really like guttural. So this is negative bass. We want positive bass. And a negative treble. Treble is like upper range, bass is lower range. A, E. And, maybe we want some like, and maybe we want to combine some sounds with it. I'll let you do some of the editing, but once we're done editing everything, we're layering sounds maybe. We're going to also use the normalize button. So normalize makes everything the same loudness. The thing about making everything the same loudness is the in-between sound is also louder. So if you have a loud room, that can really be a detriment. So you might need to remove sound effects or remove sound, silence it, remove, kind of the static. But when you're using those, it kind of takes away part of the value of your voice as well. So, your mileage will vary. The normalization will get it to be as loud as it needs to be. And then this way you can have everything at the same loudness and you don't have to mess with anything in game. So that is the basics of sound creation, looping sound, what is sound for games. And that is basically what the basics for sound for games and making maybe a looping sound effect. If you have any questions, post them down below. Also, I'd love to know, what are your favorite games in terms of audio design? Like Monument Valley is a really good one. And, you can think about sound design in a more creative way as well. It's not necessarily just write straight up copies. Sometimes, and think about, this is something, I won't be able to bring it up, But think about the Looney Tunes. If you think about it carefully, a lot of the Looney Tunes sound effects, at least the early on cartoons, like the old stuff, a lot of that was conducted by an orchestra, and the orchestra would then use their instruments to create footstep sounds or whatever. So a violin, vroom, 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 or whatever was how they would, in a fat character was a big tuba player or whatever, right? So there were times when they were using not the same sounds, but they applied that orchestral woodwind and string instrument sound. They used it as a palette to create their own set of sound effects. So you too can think about, where is it that you want to create sound from? Like, what is the style or the caliber of your audio? What is it going to sound like in general? There's a lot of theory and all of that to that. But and how also is it going to be high quality and set yourself apart and not set yourself apart in the bad way? One last piece of advice is, watch out for loud poppy noises that are irritating when they're played again and again. We call this the mom and dad alert. The mom and dad alert is a sound that is so irritating that mom or dad has to come into the room and say, "Hey, turn that down." A lot of older games had this a lot because it's just limited space, and when you hear Octung, 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 eventually it gets irritating when you're playing all those World War II games or whatever. So you really want to be able to avoid those sounds. Other than that, post down below what your favorite video game soundscapes are. Sound effects, please. Music as well is good, but please denote if it's one or the other. Post any questions you have down below, and I will see you in class.